in the gay community, we've always made the change.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's something that we can all be quite proud of, that we've made the change when we've needed to see it. So in that situation, how do we make that change? How would you advise, having seen it, having experienced it, is? It's a good place to start.
How would I make a change?
Yeah.
I know that in certain alternative communities in America, especially around Portland and San Francisco, they have community accountability processes, especially for their rapists, as a method of not bringing these people to the police. Let's face it, the police have persecuted our community since forever. We don't always want to go to the police. We don't always want to go to the law. But as a very wise sex worker friend told me recently, I wouldn't put up with this shit from my clients. Why should I put up with it from my partner?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's another story, the fact that a lot of women in our community do sex work to survive. But back to your original point as to whether there is the possibility for an accountability process, I think if people had the time and energy to dedicate themselves to that, definitely. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there just needs to still be a lot more dialogue about it, and people need to work on this stuff because it does happen in other, I don't know, activist communities, whatever. People do. I don't know the answer, but I think there just needs to be a lot more talking.
Yeah.
And a lot more people need to open it up and just not pretend that it's not going on.
I don't know whether you're aware of this, but are you friends with Russ, who did My Other Closet?
Yeah.
Yeah. My Other Closet, it was a stage show run by a guy called Russ who talked about his experiences in same-sex relationship and experiencing domestic violence. I think it is important to acknowledge that we experience rape and sexual assault at just the same levels that straight people do.
Yeah. And it's not just DV, it's a lot of incidental sleazy shit that goes on that is just really uncomfortable and makes people feel really unsafe in spaces, but just gets brushed off and excused because people are drunk, people are whatever, and you wouldn't put up with it. I don't know, a lot of the time if you said, you know, I was at a straight bar and somebody grabbed my tit, people would be up in arms, but if you're at a dyke bar and somebody grabs your tit, it's just kind of okay because they're part of the family. Yeah. And I think that really needs to be...
That needs to be...
that kind of incidental, sleazy, uncomfortable stuff that stops people from being safe in spaces that they should be safe in.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it really needs to be discussed.
Excellent. I'm going to go back over to you, Libby. How was it moving into your sexuality after having been brought up in a religious home? Moving in, like sex. Let's talk about sex. That's what we're here for.
Sure. I suppose, you know, on one level I was brought up in a very conservative home because it was religious and there were a couple of priests there constantly. It was kind of, you know, conservative, but at the same time I had a very... and unfortunately unusual gift of being extremely confident. I'm saying unfortunately because I think I was blessed and I wish everyone had that unusual gift of being confident. But I just had a high self-confidence. I used to think I was quite tall.
Have you figured it out yet?
I had
Your hair is it's giving you a couple inches. You and Dolly Parton. Yeah.
I had long, slender feet. Yeah, I used to think all sorts of things because I wasn't told... I mean, listening to this conversation here about DV and same-sex relationships, I think if you tell a child, for example, no matter what their physicality is, if you tell a child they're fat from the moment they can remember, they will grow up feeling fat. As people in same-sex relationships or, you know, alternative relationships, we're not told by the government or by this country that we're equal to a heterosexual relationship, so we're always fighting from the bottom up. I mean, my own daughter asks me why I can't get married, you know, and I have to tell my daughter because I'm not allowed to in this country. It's not legal. And what else is not legal? God, you know, all of these other terrible things. But I think we're always fighting from the bottom up. So my confidence was a gift because I wasn't fighting from the bottom up. I was always just saying, no, this is what I want. And I was certainly sexually in situations when I was a teenager where, you know, I was being asked, you know, we're going to, or not asked, but, you know, say boyfriends that said, we're going to do it now. And I would say, I'm not even wet, because I knew what that was. I was just confident. I said, no, we're not. because I'm not even wet because I haven't had coffee with your sister yet, you know.
So, Juliet, you have an interest in sex education for over 30-year-olds. Give us a little bit of information about that.
A lot of what I do is helping people to have families. Sadly, you know, a lot of people struggle with that. And part of the reason for that is age and the fact that we all pursue wonderful careers, which is fantastic, and I'm all for that. I think the pill has sort of liberated women and given us the option to have choices and to pursue our dreams and to really be part of the world, and not to be stuck at home with children. So there's a lot of great things about that. However, the bad thing about that is that we forget that actually having children is biologically supposed to happen really in our 20s and 30s. And if you get to your late 30s and then you start to want to have a family, that's when I end up seeing a lot of people. And I just sort of think that it's really important because we spend so many years trying hard, well, in sort of heterosexual relationships, trying hard not to get pregnant. And then, you know, sometimes it's a strange realisation that actually
Yikes.
I've left it too late, sort of thing. And this is the same thing for people in same-sex relationships, because a lot of women who are not, you know, in a relationship with a man, hence not getting pregnant, think that as soon as they have sperm in the right place, it'll happen, right? Because that's
how it's going to happen.
what people sort of think. Like, as long as there's sperm in the right place at the right time, of course I will get pregnant. But actually it's not true. And, you know, that the chances are sort of, you know, anywhere between 10 and 20%, which, you know...
Is that after 30?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah?
Yeah. And, you know, as you get up to your, you know, after sort of 40, it's really, really much lower than that. So I guess I'm just, you know, seeing people and wishing that people had that knowledge, not to say you've got to have your children young, but just to put it into your decision making, because when you are deciding about your careers and your choices and, you know, whether you've got to the point where you're ready to have kids, and I don't know, just put that in there. Remember that, think about that. And in relationships, you know, I see people in same-sex relationships coming and wanting to do egg sharing, for example, and thinking, okay, well, that'd be lovely because then we both feel like we're the mother. And so, you know, if I could have the eggs from my older partner, but the problem is the egg is the thing that needs to be young. It doesn't really matter what the womb is, and in fact you can be sort of 70 or more and carry a baby. It's actually the egg that needs to be young. So, you know, if you are in a relationship where one of you is getting older, then you really need to start thinking about what you're going to do to have a family.
Would you say that those are the specific challenges that face lesbians as they would like to become parents? Is that what are the other specific challenges that...
The other thing,
that
I mean,
face
that's
women
one thing,
in our
definitely,
community.
age, and just that not realising that fertility is affected. But there's other things. I think I see the cultural impact of people wanting to have a family, and the issues of sort of not being accepted by certain cultures. And that has a big impact on the people who decides within a couple to carry a baby is often affected by which family is going to be most accepting. I think another issue for people is concern over the health of the child, because, you know, and one of the things that I think is great about our donor sperm program is that we have the health of the child at the very centre of it. And with that, I mean, not only are you, sort of the risks to you are decreased by going through a donor sperm program because of infection screening and genetics and family history and all of that stuff, that if you just did it in the backyard or with someone or whatever, you know, it's different. You've got a lot of security, but the health of the child is also sort of at the core of what we do, and the fact that there is legislation that allows those donors to be identified so that children can trace their biological heritage. I think that's really important. And you know, so I think that those issues are there for people thinking, how am I going to tell my child where they came from, you know? Where in a heterosexual relationship that might not be the issue, although it can be because some guys don't have sperm or whatever. But, you know, it's a big issue. Is how's this going to affect my child and how am I going to make sure that they're happy and healthy?